Hey y'all, the video that you're getting ready to watch is something that's based on a blog that I wrote a while back. It's posted at my website, which is KelliJoMo.com/blog. All my blogs are posted there. All my videos are based off of those blogs, and they're all fully referenced, so you can get more details and fact check me. Enjoy it.
Most Americans eat just under a ton of food every year. That's a lot of food, right? I mean, 4 to 5 pounds every day, and that adds up. So it's kind of ridiculous for us to think that what we eat doesn't matter. So I'll just start right there. The processed foods, the high sugar foods, the carbs that you get with cakes and muffins and donuts and granola bars that are processed, right? All of that stuff really does matter when we eat. So I want to share a few things with you. First of all, there was one study that was done over in Europe that showed that 4 lifestyle factors heavily influenced people's health and whether or not they had a chance of avoiding or getting chronic diseases. Those 4 things were: if you moderately exercise, which is 30 minutes a day, if you don't smoke, if you are in your normal weight range, and then if you have a high intake of fruits, vegetables, grain, tubers, so like potatoes, carrots, things like that, and a very low intake of animal products. Here's what you can expect. 78% less chronic disease, 93% less type 2 diabetes. Now, that's pretty amazing. There are a lot of people that die of diabetes every year, a lot of people who are diagnosed with it every year. 93% could avoid it or reverse it, possibly, if it's not gone too far, if you made those 4 lifestyle changes. 50% less chance of stroke, 36% less risk of all forms of cancer, and 81% less risk of a heart attack. Now, another study was done at Harvard that said those same 4 criteria, so moderate exercise, not smoking, being in a normal weight range, and making sure your animal intake was low, your fiber or plant-based intake was high. They also added not drinking to excess. I believe that basically meant if you had like 1 drink or less a month. So for the people who are drinking every single day, that was considered to be an excess. So you are likely to live 12 to 14 years longer if you did those 5 things. In addition to that, you were 82% less likely to die of cardiovascular disease, and you were 65% less likely to die of cancer. I mean, that's pretty amazing.
I'm going to take a quick pause here to just ask you to do something for me. If this information has been valuable to you at all, if you would just hit that like button and then the subscribe button. Let me know that you guys are interested in this information so that I can continue to provide you things that are valuable to you. Enjoy the rest of the video.
So you've probably heard of plant-based whole food or whole food plant-based eating. Some of you may have already heard about or watched some of the movies and documentaries on Netflix. I think the viewership of those kind of skyrocketed during COVID. So Forks Over Knives, What the Health, Game Changers, those all talk about increasing your plant consumption and lowering your animal food consumption. They are put on usually by vegans who would prefer you not to have any animal products. But the truth is that there's really no long-term studies that show that you absolutely live longer if you eliminate all animal products. However, there is a limit. So there's an amount that they recommend, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Because of the increase of those types of shows, there are a lot of people who are exploring and at least trying it out. And I think that what prevents people from sticking with it is because it's not normal, it's not natural, right? You've grown up eating a certain way, and it's very hard to break away from that. It seems like it's a lot of extra work. It requires a lot more brain power for you to figure out what exactly am I going to eat every single day. So some people will try it for a while and then slack off of it. Interestingly, the Black American population is the demographic that has increased. And I believe that's probably because there are several very prominent Black Americans who have gone vegan, who have gone plant-based, and are talking a lot about it, and their health is increasing, it's improving. So other folks are following suit. So the biggest question is going to be, well, if if I decide to go plant-based, if I decide to eat more whole foods, what exactly does that mean? You know what I mean? Isn't that going to be hard for me to convert? Am I going to get enough protein? How about calcium? Am I going to have enough calcium in my diet? Am I going to be satisfied? Is this something that I'm just going to be tired of after a while? So I want to chat for just a minute about how to successfully move into a whole food diet. Can be plant-based, does not have to be vegan, but a whole food diet that is going to give you more energy, decrease the amount of chronic disease that you are likely to get. If you've already been diagnosed, you may find that your medicine can be altered or changed. You might even reverse some of these conditions. And so let's talk about what that means. So what exactly is an optimal diet? Well, I'm going to put up a screen here to show you that there's a food pyramid, right? So here is an optimal diet food pyramid. Starts off at the very bottom, minimum is 64 ounces of filtered water. You should be drinking half of your weight in ounces. So this assumes that somebody's weighing 130 pounds. So obviously if you weigh more than that, you should be drinking more water, but make sure that you're drinking filtered water. If you drink coffee, if you drink tea, if you juice at all, this does not include the water in those items. So especially if you're drinking coffee, because it is a diuretic, you want to make sure that you drink even more water to compensate for that. The food item, as you can see, that you should be eating the most of are legumes, whole grains. That doesn't mean processed breads, it means whole grains. Potatoes, squash, corn, these are your starchy foods. The longest lived populations, which we hear about a lot when we talk about the blue zones, this has been the staple of their diet for hundreds of years. This is what these people ate, and this is the majority of what they ate because they could grow it in their yards. The next largest food category would be your vegetables. So your steamed vegetables and raw vegetables both. So big salads. If you're going to steamed vegetables is probably the better way to eat them. If you want to saute them, you can, but utilize vegetable broth rather than oil. Green tea is another good thing to add to your diet. There are a lot of studies showing how consumption of a certain amount of green tea every single day will lower your cancer risk. And then sprouts. You guys know I'm big on microgreens. So microgreens are definitely up there for me. I include them every single day in my food, usually in my smoothie, but then when I have salads, I will also add them to that. The next category up is fruit. And again, these are whole fruits. These are not dried fruits. This is not fruit leather. These are not fruit juices. This is the whole fruit and nothing but the fruit. That one is a quote of Chef AJ. She's an amazing plant-based chef, and she sweetens all of her desserts that way. The next category up the food chain, and you can see as we get higher and higher up, we're eating less and less of these types of foods. So whole cereals, breads, and again, those are made with whole grains, minimally processed foods. So let's talk about the bread that you would have. So maybe Dave's Killer Bread or Ezekiel bread, something along those lines, not Wonder Bread. Sourdough is a great option. That's one of the breads that I'm trying to learn how to make. It's been a little frustrating. I've made a couple decent loaves and then some others that were like doorstops. They were horrible. But sourdough bread is great because it literally is flour, water, salt, and it's a fermentation process that makes this bread rather than external yeast. And that really is a very good food for your gut microbiome. So it's a great bread to use as an option, but you're not eating it 3 times a day. As we go a little bit higher up, you'll see that we are looking at higher fat plant foods. So that would be avocados, that would be coconut or coconut milk, coconut cream. Some recipes call for that. You don't want to have those recipes every single day. It would include nuts, seeds, olives, the nut butters. Those are all things that are very high fat. Now they're good fats, for sure. And it's okay if you include them. For instance, if you're going to use a little bit of nut butter in a dressing that you use with your noodles and vegetables, that's fine. But should you be grabbing spoonfuls of peanut butter every single day? Probably not. Almost to the top now, we've got organic animal foods, wild caught fish, 2 to 3 times a week, optional. Now, this is something that, again, you don't have to eat these things if you don't want to, but if you're going to, they really should be 2 to 3 times a week. Unfortunately, I'm not talking about bacon. I'm not talking about lunch meat. Those things are really off the table. They are not good for you. They are considered class 1 carcinogens, and you just don't want to have them. You know, they are leading toward heart disease and cancer, so you want to stay away from those. But if you want to go get some fresh caught salmon or fresh caught snapper, if you want to go get, and again, it's got to be fresh, wild caught, not something that has been raised in a fish farm someplace out in the middle of the Atlantic. You want to make sure that you're eating organic, farm fresh meat and eggs. It would be great if you could find a local source for that. If there's anybody at all within a reasonable drive that you could buy, you don't have to go buy the whole cow from them, you know, or half a cow from them. Find somebody who's willing to sell you smaller portions of it, and then stick it in your freezer, and then you'll have those items when you're ready to cook that way. And the top of the chain is, you know, have an occasional treat. You know, if it's a celebration of some sort, if it's a holiday and you want to have a piece of cake or you want to have a donut, knock yourself out. I will say that, you know, one of the things that I was raised doing was eating dessert every single day, and so that's been the hardest thing for me to stay away from. And I don't wait and just do it once or twice a year. I probably have dessert more often than that, but I make sure that they're whole food desserts. So my brownies are made with black beans and dates. My cookies, my chocolate chip cookies, are made with chickpeas and dates. So I am sweetening my desserts with the whole fruit, again, an entire fruit, like Chef AJ says, whole fruit, nothing but the fruit. And I'm utilizing a source of protein as the base. So it's, you know, again, I'm having a lot of dates, so it's a higher sugar content, but it is a healthier option. And I was there for a while, goodness gracious, I was eating these things every single week, and I noticed my weight going up. So I had to back off of that, and now I try to make it more of a monthly or bi-monthly treat rather than more often. And I also make sure that I share it with family and friends so that I'm not eating the whole thing. Because let me tell you what, I'd sit down and eat it all. I've got a definite sweet tooth. But treats, especially processed treats, like if we went someplace and somebody had a cake or, you know, a piece of pie, I'd eat it. You know what I mean? If it was a special occasion, it's just not something I'm going to make a regular habit of. This is what an optimal diet looks like. It's very, very easy to follow, and you're really not missing anything. So one of the questions that folks often ask me is, oh goodness, Kelly, where do you get your protein? Well, you know, cows don't eat meat and they get plenty of protein, right? Gorillas don't eat meat, they get plenty of protein. Elephants don't eat meat, they get plenty of protein. The source of protein comes from the plants. And we've kind of shortcut that a little bit over the years because we've become more and more focused on eating animal products and less focused on eating whole plant foods. So we have equated protein with animal products, but that's really not necessary at all. But also, I believe that we've allowed some marketing gurus to have us convinced that we need more protein. I know that I remember talking to a trainer once. I'm like, I got to get like 30 or 40 grams of protein for every meal, don't I? And he's like, no, you really don't. And I wasn't sure that I believed him. And then I started doing the research and I found out. So here's the thing, and you've got to watch it because I've recently seen some health experts, even some doctors online that have talked about this formula that I'm going to give you, but they've quoted it incorrectly. So make sure you pay attention. We only need 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of weight. Now, what you'll hear it quoted as is 0.8 grams of protein for every pound, and that's not true. It's for every kilogram. And there's 2.2 pounds in 1 kilogram. So what that means is for the average 140-pound woman, she needs about 50 grams of protein a day. The average 200-pound man needs 72 grams of protein a day. It's a lot different than what you hear, especially when folks say, you got to have 100 grams a day, you got to have 150 grams a day. We'll talk about this in just a second, but too much protein, especially when it's tied to animal proteins, is very, very unhealthy. Now, there are some exceptions to that 0.8 grams of protein per 1 kilogram of weight rule or formula, and that would be folks over 65 years old. They have a tendency to not absorb and retain as much protein, utilize it's just not as much protein as bioavailable to them. So you might bump that up to about 1.2. And then, of course, if you've got folks who are, heavy duty working out, strength training, things like that. So we're talking about not the average guy, okay? Not the average guy and girl that's out there going to the gym. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the ones that are doing this and competing heavy duty. They might bounce it up to 1.2 or 1.3 grams of protein per 1 kilogram of weight. But again, we're not going any higher than that. I've got a graphic here I'm going to put up so you can take a look at this. You see here, small children only need between 13 and 34 grams a day at all. Teenagers need about 34 for females, about 52 for males. Bodybuilders could obviously use a little bit more. Endurance athletes, a little bit more, maybe even more so than the bodybuilders. But the average adult, it's 0.8 grams per 1 kilogram of weight. And for the average adult over 65, it's 1.2 grams per 1 kilogram of weight. All right, so what does that much protein look like to a carnivore? So if you had a couple eggs, bacon and milk for breakfast, then a burger for lunch, and a small 6-ounce chicken breast for dinner, you've consumed 132 grams of protein already. That's a typical meal for most Americans. It has been for me in my past, right? So I was getting, as a woman, 3 times the amount of, or 2.5 times the amount of protein that I needed. I already know that some of you are thinking, wait, listen, Kelli, I'm a carnivore at heart. I just like meat. I prefer to have on my plate 80% meat, 20% vegetables, and that vegetable's probably a baked potato with lots of butter and sour cream. And listen, you are free to eat the way that you want to eat. I'm just letting you know that there may be some unintended consequences to that pattern of eating. Again, if you go out and you do that once on your birthday because you go to the restaurant that says, hey, if you eat this much meat, whatever, you get a prize, do it. But if this is something that's become a pattern, then I can pretty much guess and estimate and with certainty what's going to happen in your future. At some point, that's going to catch up with you. If you're in your 20s and 30s right now, then you're probably not going to feel the effect of it immediately. But by the time you're in your late 40s or 50s or 60s, you're going to feel the effect of that. You're going to have high blood pressure. You might end up with chronic heart disease of some sort. You're probably going to have high cholesterol. You may have diabetes. You're certainly probably going to have some sort of an autoimmune disease. You might have cancer by that point. Those are all of the things that come from that level of consumption of animal food products. One of the things that has been found in research is that too much protein, especially when it comes from animal products that's high in fat, causes kidney function to be impaired. That contributes to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. That is a primary cause of systemic inflammation, and systemic inflammation is what causes disease, right? You guys have probably all heard that. When animal protein is 12% or more of calories, it turns on cancer proliferation. There's been no long-term studies on any of these high meat diets. So you hear people talk about keto and paleo and carnivore, and I feel so much better and da-da-da-da-da. And I'm not saying that they don't. I'm just saying that when you take a look at long-term health studies, there's not one single study that points to any of those high animal product protein diets as providing longevity and health from a long-term basis. You might lose a little bit of weight up front. You might have a little bit of systemic inflammation go down up front. You might have your cholesterol go down for a moment up front because you've stopped eating all the processed foods and you're eating whole foods. But eventually, after several months or a year or two, if you can sustain it, because those diets really are not very sustainable for long term, then you're going to find that all of those things start to go back up again. The bottom line here regarding protein, honestly, is that if you're getting enough calories and you're eating well, like the optimal diet program that we talked about a minute ago, then you're getting plenty of protein. You're getting more than enough. What we're not getting enough of is fiber. So even the government shows that we are 95% of us are fiber deficient in our diet. And what's interesting is the recommendations are probably low. So we probably should be getting closer to 70, 80, 90, 100 grams of protein a day, and they're only recommending 40 or so. And 95% of Americans aren't even getting that. And fiber only comes from plant products. So if you're not getting enough fiber, it's because you're not eating enough plants. Okay, so we've talked about plants and fiber and protein, but what about calcium? Kelli, if I stop eating dairy, if I eliminate dairy from my diet, because you guys noticed that was not on the optimal food pyramid at all. So if you stop eating dairy, what happens to your calcium intake? Well, let's take a look at this screenshot. You can see that this is a list of several countries and where their calcium intake is per day. So you can see that South Africa, Singapore, Hong Kong, these places where Papua New Guinea, Yugoslavia, Spain, where their calcium intake is very low, they have very, very low incidences of fractures as well. As their calcium intake goes up, so America, United Kingdom, New Zealand, Norway, Sweden, look at the fractures that are occurring for those folks. They have actually found that the higher the calcium intake, the higher the fracture risk. The reason that we've been told that we have to worry about this is because as we get older, our bone density changes, especially in women. But you know what? We don't need to have as dense of bones as we get older and we come out of childbearing age. That's just not something that's necessary anymore. God has designed our bodies to work just the way they're supposed to work if we would just leave them alone. So it's okay if our bone density starts to increase a little bit as we get older, as long as we are building strength in our bones. And you do that through exercise. Strength training exercise build your bones and make them stronger than any amount of calcium is going to. If you're just taking calcium supplements or you're taking that shot that they give you once a month and you assume that you're going to have strong bones from that, you're probably going to be disappointed. The reality is that the calcium that you get from leafy green vegetables, cruciferous vegetables, your citrus fruits, beans, and sweet potatoes is all that you need to be able to have all the calcium that you need for your body to function properly. All right, so does a whole food plant-based diet mean that I've got to eat salads all the time? No, it doesn't. Now, I will tell you there's a big difference between, take a look at this, the salad that you typically think of or you might get at a steak restaurant versus the kind of salads that I eat. See, I'm not just eating iceberg lettuce with a couple slices of tomato and cucumber, right? I am eating mixed greens. I'm adding some kale in it. I'm adding some sweet potatoes and some quinoa, things that I know are healthy for me and mixed together have just an amazing taste. You're very satisfied when you're finished eating them. But the good news is that you don't have to eat salads all the time. Leafy green vegetables, cruciferous vegetables, they are super good for you. If you just cannot stand the idea of eating a salad though, and you'd rather have some of that sauteed in some vegetable broth with a little bit of garlic, then do it that way. Those things are very good for you though, and they are the foods that will decrease your risk of chronic disease. But changing to a plant-based diet really can be very easy. So I'm going to give you 3 steps here that will show you how you can shift over to a plant-based diet, and you are going to start to look and feel better than you have in the longest time. First step is you want to start eating the vegetables, the root vegetables, the tubers, the fruits, the greens, the grains that you like. If you don't like kale, don't eat kale. There are other cruciferous vegetables that you can eat instead. If you don't like green apples, then eat the red apples. That doesn't really matter. Eat more of the things you like though. So if you're somebody that says, listen, I like about 3 vegetables, okay, so eat those 3. Eat them a lot. Figure out different ways to eat them, but make sure that you're just eating more of the things that you like. We don't want this to be a chore. We don't want this to be something that you're like, oh my gosh, I gotta eat my vegetables. But what I think you're gonna find is that as time progresses, your taste buds are going to start to change and you're going to start liking these vegetables a lot more than you think you did. The second thing that will help get you to a more plant-based whole food eating pattern is to batch cook. When you're cooking things that you open up out of a box or a bag, you can cook in 30 minutes. It's super quick and easy. But if you're trying to eat whole foods, then that requires some preparation. And there are some things you can do really fast. I mean, I'll give you, for instance, last night we I had 2 sweet potatoes in the pantry, and I had 2 small bags of the little new potatoes. So I cooked those up, within about a half hour. It took about a half hour for those to cook. And then I smashed them and roasted them in the air fryer. And while I was doing that, I took some asparagus and broccoli, onion, squash and zucchini, and I cooked them up real quick on the wok with a little bit of vegetable broth and some seasonings. And that was our dinner last night. That was the entire dinner. And it didn't take long. It was certainly less than an hour. The potatoes took the longest to cook, but it didn't take that long. But if you only have a half hour, there are definitely some recipes that I could get to you if you're interested that would be 30 minutes or less. But if you really want to make sure that when you get home, you've got a good meal ready for you just to heat up and move on with, then batch cooking is the way to do it. So here's some things that you can batch cook. Sweet or white potatoes. Super easy to bake ahead of time, put in the refrigerator. The white potatoes actually get a little bit sweeter as they refrigerate, and the starch becomes, again, something that your body can process a little bit better. It becomes a more resistant starch, which is better for you because it keeps your glucose levels down. So to cook these things ahead of time and put them in the fridge is really the best way to do it. Later, you can take those sweet potatoes or the white potatoes and you could just eat them just the way they are. You can cut them and air fry them into French fries or little small cubes. You can roast them with other vegetables. You can mash them. There's all kinds of things you can do with those potatoes throughout the week if they're cooked ahead of time. Onions and peppers. A lot of times I will take my onions and peppers and I'll cook them up ahead. I won't add seasoning to them, but I will cut them up. You can cut them up, put them in the refrigerator with a little bit of water, or you can just go ahead and cook them, which is what I usually do. I use them with quesadillas. I use them with tacos. Sometimes I will use them in a stir fry. I will also a lot of times make like a Buddha bowl, and that's where the potatoes come in handy because I'll have some sweet potatoes cooked already. I'll have some peppers and onions already cooked, and all I have to do is I will choose to usually, rather than, unless I'm feeding a lot of people and I just need to make a lot of rice, I will buy these frozen bags or pantry stable bags of rice that's already cooked that has nothing in it but the rice. So you're not getting any seasonings, you're not getting oils, and I will heat those up and I'll make a Buddha bowl real quick. Rice is something you can cook ahead of time. If you like yellow rice or white rice, brown rice, I will tell you that it's healthier. You get more nutrients out of the brown rice than you do anything else. And it also holds up in the fridge a little bit better. It doesn't get real mushy like the other two do, but you can cook those ahead of time as well. The next couple things that I find that I batch cook every couple weeks, I've got a great burger recipe and a lentil loaf or a meatloaf type recipe that I love to cook, and they have a lot of the same ingredients, so I will typically cook those at the same time along with veggie ground. Now, the gentleman that made up this recipe for veggie ground, I don't know where he got it from, but it was ingenious. It literally produces a product that feels almost like cooked ground beef is. I know that you can buy that from the grocery store. Morningstar, some other places have frozen veggie crumbles that you can use, but they have a lot of byproducts in them and a lot of processed foods in them and oils. This veggie ground recipe literally has nothing but raw vegetables in it, and it is so good. So I will cook that up. I'll put them in like quart-sized containers. I usually can make 6 or 7 of those out of one recipe of the veggie ground, and I will flatten them up and I stick them in the freezer. Then I can pull them out at any point during the week and make spaghetti with them. I can make sloppy joes with them. I can make tacos. I can make a shepherd's pie with that, and then the white potatoes that I had cooked previously. It is so easy to assemble food if you do this batch cooking method. Obviously, during the colder months, chili and soup is something really easy. Again, you can make that one morning. You can stick everything in a crock pot, let it cook throughout the day on low, and then you might have a meal for several days. Sometimes if I cook soups that we don't finish, I will take those and put them in the freezer so that I have them for down the road. One of the last things that you can batch cook would be a salad. So you have to be careful with that because sometimes things like cucumbers and cut up tomatoes can become mushy, and cut up peppers, they can just become nasty. But you can prep the ingredients and then assemble the salad later when you're ready. Again, makes it super, super easy to put together a really great meal. So batch cooking is the second way that you can convert your home to more of a whole food, plant-based eating pattern. The third way that you can convert your house to a whole food, plant-based diet or pattern of eating would be really to redefine convenience foods. So we think of convenience foods as things like mac and cheese or hamburger helper a box of frozen lasagna, that kind of thing. But what if convenience foods can be things like canned beans or frozen vegetables, a pre-made portion of the brown rice, a canned or jarred spaghetti sauce? Things like this are super, super easy. Again, like I said, I make the veggie ground ahead of time. I've got a couple jars of spaghetti sauce on hand at all times. I've got some spaghetti noodles on hand at all time. I typically use either the chickpea or the brown rice and cauliflower mixes, just depending upon where I'm shopping. And so I can literally put together a meal that is satisfying and everybody's happy with in 30 minutes. Even if you're going to go out to dinner, there are things that you can do at typical fast food or chain restaurants to make sure that you're just eating a better meal. We have ordered from Domino's, and I just order mine without cheese. I have gone to Chipotle and ordered my food. I typically don't get their plant-based option, again, because it's made with some processed stuff that I don't like. So I just get the greens as a base, get some rice put on it, black beans, all the toppings that I want, and I've got an amazing meal, and I don't miss anything. You can go to Tropical Smoothie and you can get any of their wraps or bowls just without the chicken. Mexican and Asian restaurants are some of my favorite because they always have vegetables to offer. So you can get beans and rice, you can get a quesadilla, which is the vegetables and no cheese. You can get a fajita and tell them to hold the sour cream and the cheese. And you've got all these vegetables that you can have. Very, very filling, very satisfying. And it allows you to go out to a normal restaurant. You don't have to go find a vegan restaurant, right? You can just go to a normal restaurant and eat with everybody else without a problem. Now, if there's just a couple of you, you could even take a look at some of the food service companies. So there's a couple. Purple Carrot is one that offers meals. I think there's another one called Spinely. I'll go ahead and mention it down in the comments. I'll look it up and make sure I have the correct information. But they provide plant-based meals that are really good that you just assemble. Great way for 1 or 2 people to eat. It's a little costly if you're going to have to feed, 4, 5, 6 people at one time, but for just couples or an individual person, it would be a great way to make your convenience meals. Another option is a company called Mama Says, and that's Mama Sezz, and they will actually send you pre-cooked meals. I did that for Alan once when I was going to be out of town for a week visiting the girls in Texas, and I made sure that he had food for the entire week, and it was very satisfying. He said the food was absolutely delicious. Again, a little costly if you're going to be feeding a family of 4, but if it's just you or 2 of you, or you need to feed somebody while you're out of town, it's a great option. Learning to modify your favorite recipes and provide yourself with some good options for eating is really a lot easier than you think it is. And there are some amazing plant-based chefs and folks online, YouTube and Instagram and Facebook, where you can get all kinds, everything you can imagine. Most of the recipes that I use, I'm not a chef, I'm not a nutritionist. So the stuff that I do, I'm either just throwing together food that I happen to have in the house, or I am going to these folks for the recipes. And so I will put down below a link where you can go to get some of my favorite chefs, and you can find some of their recipes. It's really just a matter of you trying some things until you find something you like and then stick with it. I made sure that on my phone I have a breakfast, a lunch, a dinner, a burgers, snacks, all these different little categories, and I have all of my recipes that I have just at a click of a button, literally. It's very simple and very easy. So I'll make sure I have that link below for you. Listen, the bottom line is you've got this. If this is something you're interested in doing, if you really want to start eating healthy, if you're concerned about some health things that are going on with you currently, or maybe some family history and you don't want to head in that direction, and you really want some help with doing this, I've actually got a Where Do I Begin class that I would love to have you participate in. So if you're interested at all in that, again, there's going to be a link below in the YouTube description here where you can click on it and you can find out some more information about Where Do I Begin. If you happen to be watching this on a different platform, obviously the links won't work, but you can go into my bio, both in Facebook and Instagram, and the class will be linked there. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. It really is just as easy as 1, 2, 3. There's a lot of compelling reasons why we should be eating more plants and less animals, and I would love to help you on that journey if you need it.